Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Mercer. Long-haul drivers spend their nights inside a narrow island of dashboard light, with blacktop ahead, mirrors behind, and hundreds of empty miles on every side. The engine becomes a second heartbeat. The radio hisses, tires hum, and sometimes another sound slips in where no sound should be. Tonight's stories come from people who make their living on those roads. Names and certain details have been changed, but the accounts remain as they were told. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. By the time Evan Mercer reached the packing plant outside Grand Island, the evening shift had already started. He heard the place before he saw it. Refrigeration units growled behind the concrete buildings. Forklifts gave short warning beeps inside the loading bays. Every few seconds, an air brake released somewhere in the dark. Evan had been hauling refrigerated freight for nearly 19 years. He liked the predictability of it. Temperature mattered. Delivery windows mattered. A missing seal or a warm trailer could not be explained away with a friendly phone call. He also liked the sound of the refrigeration unit behind his cab. It filled the sleeper with a low mechanical vibration that covered the smaller noises of parking lots' doors, closing, shoes on gravel. Someone trying the wrong truck handle at 3 in the morning. That evening, his trailer was scheduled to carry frozen beef to a distribution warehouse outside Cheyenne. It was an easy overnight run. He expected to arrive before dawn, sleep for a few hours, then find breakfast somewhere that served potatoes on real plates. While the trailer was being loaded, Evan sat in the cab and opened the dinner his wife had packed. 2 ham sandwiches, a peeled orange in a plastic bag, 3 oatmeal cookies wrapped in foil. Nina always gave him 3 cookies. She said 2 looked like a snack and 4 looked like an apology. Evan placed 1 cookie on the dashboard for later. Then he called home. Nina answered from the kitchen. He could hear water running and cabinet doors closing. Their daughter, Molly, was trying to finish a school project about the solar system. She had built Saturn from a foam ball and an old compact discs. Molly told him, "Saturn does not care," Evan said. Molly considered that. Then she asked whether Wyoming had stars. Evan told her it had more stars than Nebraska because the towns were farther apart. He promised to take a photograph if he found a safe place to stop. Before hanging up, Nina reminded him that the passenger side headlight had flickered the week before. "I changed the connection. You said you tightened it. That was before I changed it." A pause followed. "Call me when you park," she said. Evan promised he would. The loading crew finished shortly after 9. A young employee named Curtis brought the paperwork to the cab. He had a red knit cap and the unfinished beginnings of a beard. "-10 all the way," Curtis said. They packed it tight. Evan stepped out for his inspection. He checked the tires, hinges, fuel level, and refrigeration unit. Cold air rolled from the trailer when Curtis opened one door for the final check. The pallets stood from floor to ceiling, each one wrapped in clear plastic. There was barely enough room to fit a hand between them. Curtis shut the door. Evan watched him attach the metal seal. The seal number matched the paperwork. At the guardhouse, an older security officer wrote Evan's departure time on a clipboard. A radio played quietly beside the window. The signal faded in and out beneath the refrigeration units. "Quiet night," Evan said. The guard looked toward the trailers. "They usually are when they start." Evan waited for more. The guard handed back his license. "Drive safe." Evan pulled onto the interstate a little after 10. The sky was clear and the wind came from the north. It pushed against the side of the trailer in long, steady breaths. For the first hour, nothing changed. The reefer unit held its temperature. The engine settled into its familiar range. Evan drank coffee from a steel thermos covered with Peeling Planet stickers Molly had put there years earlier. Traffic thinned beyond Kearney. Farm lights disappeared behind bare fields. The road became 2 pale lanes surrounded by land that showed no edge. Evan listened to a late-night call-in program until the station dissolved into static. He switched to the Weather Channel. A recorded voice warned of freezing fog near the Wyoming border. Then he turned the radio off. The truck filled with its own sounds, tires against pavement, the soft rattle of the empty cup holder, air moving around the mirrors. Behind it all, the refrigeration unit hummed. Evan first heard the knocking several miles after the last open exit. 3 knocks, they came from behind the cab. Each one was firm and evenly spaced, not loud enough to shake the truck. loud enough to rise through the engine and road noise. Evan looked into both mirrors. The trailer doors were closed. No vehicle followed close enough for him to see its headlights. The shoulder was empty. He reduced his speed. Nothing shifted inside the trailer. No straps snapped. No new vibration came through the frame. He turned off the fan. The reefer continued its low mechanical drone. Evan waited. The next exit was closed for construction. Orange barrels blocked the ramp and a portable sign directed traffic onward. He passed it at 50 miles per hour. 3 more knocks came from the trailer. This time they were slower. Evan's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. He moved into the right lane and watched the shoulder for a place wide enough to stop. A sign promised a rest area in 14 miles. He kept driving. Several explanations formed and fell apart. Frozen cargo could settle. Plastic wrapping could contract. A loose panel on the refrigeration unit might strike the trailer wall. None of those sounds should have paused when he slowed down. Evan switched on the Citizens Band radio. "Westbound. Anyone behind a Mercer freight reefer?" Static answered. He asked again. A tired voice finally came through. "I see you about half a mile ahead. Anything loose on my trailer?" "No." "Looks clean." Evan recognized the voice as belonging to a driver he had passed near Kearney. The man was hauling construction equipment on a flatbed. "You hear anything unusual back there?" Evan asked. The radio remained quiet for a moment. "Just you asking questions." Evan thanked him and lowered the volume. He reached the rest area without hearing the knocks again. Only 3 other trucks were parked there. Their engines idled beneath the yellow lights. Evan chose a space near the entrance. He left the engine running and walked around the trailer with his flashlight. The wind carried the smell of diesel and frozen soil. The seal was intact. He checked the doors, latches, tires, suspension, and refrigeration housing. Nothing hung loose. Nothing moved when he pressed against the side panels. He placed one palm against the aluminum wall. The vibration from the refrigeration unit traveled into his wrist. Beneath it, the trailer felt solid and cold. A man in a brown coat stepped down from the next truck. He wore slippers despite the frost. "Trouble?" the man asked. "Something is knocking when I drive. Load shift. Does not feel like one." The man lit a cigarette and looked along the trailer. "How many knocks?" Evan turned toward him. 3. The lighter clicked shut. The man drew once from the cigarette. "Cargo does not count." He walked toward the restroom before Evan could ask what he meant. Evan stood beside the trailer until the cold reached through his gloves. Nothing knocked. The reefer temperature remained steady at -10. He called his dispatcher. Jamie answered on the 5th ring. Her voice sounded small beneath the office noise. Evan described what he had heard. He kept his tone flat and gave her the seal number, temperature, and location. "Any movement on the load gauge?" "No." "Any warning lights?" Jamie checked his route. The nearest approved facility was in North Platte behind him. A service location near Ogallala had closed for the night. "If the temperature is holding and the seal is intact, continue to Cheyenne," she said. "Pull over if anything changes." Evan looked at the dark trailer behind him. Something already changed. Jamie did not answer immediately. Then she said, "Keep me awake with you." For the next 40 minutes, Jamie stayed on the phone. They spoke about ordinary things. A driver who had submitted a fuel receipt from a fishing boat, the broken vending machine at the dispatch office, Molly's crooked model of Saturn. The conversation helped. Evan passed 2 open exits. The trailer remained quiet. Jamie finally had to take another call. She told him to contact her if the knocking returned. It returned less than a minute after Evan passed the next exit. 3 knocks. They came from farther back this time. Evan glanced at the route display. The next services were 31 miles away. Between them lay only an abandoned ramp and a county road marked as closed. The refrigeration unit stopped. Its cycle had ended normally, but the sudden absence exposed every small sound around Evan. Loose coins trembled in the console. Rubber whispered across the pavement. Wind pressed against the passenger door. Then came 3 knocks. They were closer to the cab. Evan reached for the phone. His thumb missed the screen twice. Before he could call Jamie, the knocking began again. Not 3 this time. It traveled forward through the trailer in pairs, 2 near the rear doors, 2 near the middle, 2 directly behind the cab. The passenger side mirror trembled. Evan pressed the accelerator. The truck gained speed slowly. The knocks matched him. When the engine rose, they came faster. When he eased off, they spread apart. He did not look away from the road. The abandoned ramp appeared ahead. Its sign had been removed, leaving 2 empty posts. Snow fencing blocked the road beyond it. A figure stood between the posts. Evan heard the loose fabric of a coat snapping in the wind before his headlights reached the ramp. Then the light crossed it. There was no one there. Only a strip of black plastic tangled around one post. Evan drove past. The moment the ramp disappeared behind the trailer, the knocking stopped. He continued for another mile before calling highway patrol. He reported a possible person trapped inside the trailer. He did not mention the figure by the ramp. He did not mention the way the sound had moved. A trooper met him at a truck stop outside Ogallala. Her name was Keller. She listened while Evan explained the seal and the cargo. Then she stood beside the trailer and waited through a complete refrigeration cycle. Nothing happened. Dispatch authorized the seal to be broken. Keller cut it herself. Cold vapor spilled around their legs when they opened the doors. The pallets were still packed tightly against one another. The plastic wrapping remained smooth. There was no space for anyone to stand. Keller climbed onto the trailer and swept her flashlight over the load. "Call out if you are inside," she said. The refrigeration unit started again. The trailer walls vibrated. Plastic crackled around the frozen boxes. No one answered. Keller stepped down. She examined the underside and roof, then wrote a report for the replacement seal. "It could have been the load settling," she said. Evan looked into the packed trailer. It moved toward me. Keller held his gaze for several seconds. "Then do not open it alone." The rest of the drive passed without another knock. At the Cheyenne warehouse, the receiving crew counted every case. Nothing was missing. Nothing had been added. The temperature record showed no interruption. Evan delivered the empty trailer to a cleaning facility later that morning. Before leaving, he asked an employee to inspect the interior walls. The employee found no loose panels. Evan never hauled that trailer again. He does not know whether it remains in service. He still drives refrigerated loads, though he no longer passes a highway exit without checking the distance to the next one. If the gap is too long, he stops early and waits for daylight. A highway teaches its drivers that distance is not empty. It is only beyond the reach of immediate help. Even now, whenever a reefer falls silent at a fuel island, Evan sets down his coffee and waits to hear whether the aluminum behind him will knock 3 times. Denise Holt heard the travel center before the highway signs appeared. Diesel engines idled behind the trees. Air brakes sighed across the parking lot. Somewhere near the fuel lanes, a damaged belt squealed each time a truck pulled forward. It was almost midnight when she left Interstate 40 in eastern Arkansas. She had been driving since early afternoon, hauling appliance parts from Memphis to Oklahoma City. The shipment was light, but the warehouse had kept her waiting for 5 hours. Denise had spent 11 years driving alone. She knew how fatigue changed the road. Lane markers began to drift at the edges. Exit signs seemed to arrive twice. Small decisions took longer than they should. She never argued with those signs. Her company required a 10-hour break before the morning run. The travel center had showers, hot food, and a parking lot large enough that she would not need to squeeze between 2 refrigerated trailers. Denise circled the lot once before choosing a space beneath a light. The bulb flickered, but it stayed on. She backed in beside a flatbed carrying plastic drainage pipes. Before shutting down, she wrote the mileage in a green notebook. She had bought the notebook during her first week as a driver. Its cover had softened over the years, and several pages were held together with clear tape. Every trip ended with 3 entries. Mileage, fuel level, the place where she planned to sleep. Denise added the travel center, then drew a small square beside it. She would fill in the square after checking the trailer seal. Her son Eli called while she was putting on her coat. He was 23 and worked evenings at a grocery store in Little Rock. They often spoke during his drive home. He complained about customers leaving frozen food beside the cash registers. Denise complained about warehouses that treated appointment times as suggestions. "You eating tonight?" Eli asked. "I had almonds. That is not eating." There were a lot of almonds. Ellie did not accept this, so Denise promised to order eggs inside the travel center. In return, he promised to replace the burned-out light above his apartment stairs. They both knew only one of those promises would be kept that night. Denise ended the call and completed her inspection. She checked the tires, trailer doors, seal lights, and locking jaws beneath the trailer. She tugged each airline, even though she had checked them before leaving Memphis. The pavement was wet from an earlier rain. Water dripped from the underside of the trailer and tapped against her coat sleeve. A man in a reflective vest walked between the parked trucks. Denise noticed him near the end of the row. He carried something blue in one hand. It looked like a tire gauge or a large marker. He bent beside a white tractor, then continued toward the back fence. Denise assumed he worked for the travel center. Large truck stops often had someone checking parking permits or offering mobile repairs. She filled in the square in her notebook. Inside, the restaurant occupied one corner of the building. Half the tables were empty. A television above the counter showed a basketball game with the sound turned off. Denise ordered scrambled eggs and wheat toast. She asked for grape jelly, but the waitress brought strawberry. "Grape is in the silver bowl," the waitress said. "People keep stealing the packets, so we hide it." Her name tag read Trina. She had short gray hair and a pencil tucked behind one ear. Denise found the silver bowl beneath the cash register. She took 2 packets and placed one in her coat pocket. Eli liked grape jelly, and she had collected packets for him since he was a child. At the table behind her, 2 drivers discussed a bridge closure near Fort Smith. Their voices blended with the clatter of dishes and the coffee grinder. Trina returned with the eggs. "You staying out back?" she asked. "Under the broken light. That one has been broken since Tuesday. It is still trying." Trina glanced toward the windows. "Keep your doors locked." "We had someone wandering through the lot last night. Drunk, did not walk like one." Trina moved to another table. Denise ate slowly. She sent Eli a photograph of the grape jelly packet. He replied with a photograph of the dark stairway outside his apartment. She was finishing her coffee when she saw the man in the reflective vest again. He stood beyond the restaurant windows, near the row where Denise had parked. His back was turned. The blue object was still in his hand. A truck entered the lot and its headlights crossed him. The man stepped between 2 trailers. When the light passed, he was gone. Denise paid and walked through the store. She bought a bottle of water, a toothbrush, and a small packet of cleaning wipes for the dashboard. The cashier was talking to another employee about a blocked toilet. Neither looked toward the parking lot. Outside, the temperature had dropped. The engine seemed louder than before. Their separate vibrations joined into one continuous note that traveled through the pavement. Denise approached her truck from the passenger side. She always did this at night. It allowed her to see beneath the trailer before reaching the driver's door. Nothing moved below the truck. She checked the trailer seal again, then walked around the front of the cab. A blue line had been drawn beside the driver's door handle. It was no longer than her thumb. The mark was thick and slightly waxy. Denise rubbed it with one glove, but the color only spread across the white paint. She looked toward the building. No one stood near the entrance. A driver crossed the fuel lanes carrying a shower bag further down the row. A person climbed into a dark pickup truck. Denise took out one of the cleaning wipes. The blue mark came away after several passes. She inspected the door, mirror, steps, and fuel tank. There were no other marks. The cab was still locked. Inside, she checked the sleeper. The blanket lay folded against the wall. Her spare shoes remained beneath the bunk. Nothing had been disturbed. Denise locked both doors. Then she threaded the red passenger seat belt through the door pull and clicked it into place. She did the same with the driver's belt. It was a habit she had learned from another woman during her first year on the road. The belts would not prevent the doors from being broken open. They would make it harder to do quietly. Denise changed into a sweatshirt and placed her phone on the bunk. She listened to a voicemail from her sister about their mother's birthday dinner. Outside, someone dropped a metal tool. The sound rang once between the trucks. Denise stopped the message and waited. No one knocked. No footsteps approached. She lowered the curtain around the windshield, but left a narrow gap beside the driver's mirror. Through it, she could see the side of the flatbed next to her. A blue line marked its driver's door. Denise leaned closer to the glass. The line matched the one she had removed. She put her boots back on and stepped from the cab. The driver of the flatbed was not visible. His curtains were closed and no light came from inside. Denise walked toward the next row. She found another blue mark on a red sleeper cab, then another on an older truck parked near the fence. The marked trucks had little in common. Different companies, different cargo, different states on their license plates. All were parked away from the fuel lanes. All had their curtains closed. Denise returned to the travel center. Trina was wiping the restaurant counter. "Do your parking people mark trucks?" Denise asked, with chalk sometimes, not the cabs, blue marks beside the doors. Trina stopped wiping. "I saw one yesterday," she said. "Thought the driver did it." "Which truck?" Trina pointed toward the back of the lot. "A woman hauling for a furniture company. She left before sunrise." "Did she say why?" "She did not come back inside." Trina picked up the telephone and called the manager. No one answered the office extension. Denise asked the cashier whether the travel center employed anyone wearing a reflective vest in the parking area. The cashier shook his head. Their maintenance worker had gone home at 8. Denise called the sheriff's non-emergency number. She described the man, the marks, and the location. The dispatcher said a deputy would check the lot when one became available. Denise walked back to her truck with Trina watching from the entrance. The blue mark had returned. It crossed the same place beside the driver's door. This one was longer. Denise stopped several feet from the cab. A faint hiss came from beneath the trailer. She crouched near the rear of the tractor. The service airline had been cut partway through. Air escaped from the opening in a thin, steady stream. The cut had not been there during her inspection. Denise stood and looked along the parking row. Curtains covered every windshield. Engines continued to idle. No one nearby had reacted to the sound. She climbed into the cab and locked the door. The air pressure gauge had begun to fall. Denise called emergency services. She gave the truck number, parking row, and description of the damaged line. The dispatcher told her to remain inside. A soft scrape came from the passenger side. The door handle moved once. The seatbelt tightened through the pull. Denise held the phone against her ear and reached for the air horn. A man appeared beside the passenger window. He wore a reflective vest over a gray sweatshirt. His hood covered most of his face. He knocked twice on the glass. "Your airline is leaking," he called. Denise did not answer. She raised the phone so he could see it. The man stepped back from the window. Then he said her name. Not the company name printed on the truck, her name. "Denise, you cannot drive it like that." The lettering on her door showed only the carrier and registration information. Her name appeared on the shipping paperwork inside the cab. Denise pressed the horn. The sound broke across the lot. Drivers sat upright behind windshields. Curtains moved. A truck near the fuel lanes flashed its headlights. The man beside her window turned away. Another man crawled from beneath the trailer. He carried the blue marker between his teeth. Denise held the horn down. A driver from the next row ran toward her truck with a heavy flashlight. The two men crossed the parking lot without speaking. They climbed into a white cargo van parked beside the fence. The van left through the entrance lane. Its rear plate had been covered with a dark cloth. The deputy arrived 12 minutes later. By then, several drivers were standing near Denise's truck. One had photographed the damaged airline. Another had found a small folding knife beneath the trailer. The deputy searched the lot. Every blue mark had been wiped away. The security camera facing the back rows had recorded only a gray screen. Someone had covered the lens with a plastic shopping bag. The knife carried no usable prints. The van did not appear clearly on the camera near the fuel lanes. A mobile mechanic replaced Denise's airline before dawn. She moved the truck beneath the lights beside the main entrance and remained awake until her required break ended. Several weeks later, an investigator called her. 2 drivers had reported similar markings at travel centers in Oklahoma and Tennessee. Both had found damage beneath their trucks. Neither had seen the men clearly. No one was arrested. Denise still drives through eastern Arkansas, but she no longer sleeps in the back rows of truck stops. Before climbing into her cab, she photographs both doors, every handle, and the connections beneath the trailer. A crowded parking lot can hide a person more easily than an empty road. Engines cover footsteps, and curtains make every witness blind. Each night, before Denise threads the red seatbelts through her door pulls, she wipes the white paint until no trace of blue remains. Snow began tapping against Luis Ortega's windshield while he was still parked outside the diner. At first, each flake made a soft, dry sound. Then the temperature rose a little, and the flakes turned heavy. They struck the glass like grains of rice. Luis watched them collect along the wiper blades. He had been hauling restaurant equipment from Boise to Coeur d'Alene. The trailer contained stainless steel tables, industrial sinks, and enough boxed glassware to make every rough patch of road expensive. The delivery appointment was not until the following afternoon. He had time to wait for the plows. Luis preferred waiting. During 16 years of driving, he had learned that schedules became much less important once a truck crossed a guardrail. He had seen drivers save 20 minutes and lose 6 months. The diner stood beside the final fuel stop before the pass. It had 6 tables, a counter, and a ceiling fan that turned even in winter. A handwritten sign near the register promised homemade pie. Luis ordered beef stew. While he waited, he called his daughter Camila. She lived outside Boise with her husband and their 7-year-old son, Nico. Nico answered the phone. "I lost a tooth," he announced. Luis asked where it had gone. "In an envelope." "Good. Teeth are hard to replace." Nico explained that the tooth fairy paid more for front teeth. Luis said this sounded like price fixing. Camila took the phone and asked about the weather. Luis told her he was waiting beside the pass. He did not mention that the snow was getting thicker. "You have your chains, 4 sets blankets, 2 food." Luis looked at the bowl arriving in front of him. Enough to survive several minutes. Camila told him to send a message when he stopped for the night. Luis promised he would. He had made that promise on nearly every trip since she was 14. Back then, she could not sleep until she knew where he had parked. At 30, she still checked her phone before bed. The waitress placed the stew beside a basket of crackers. Her name was June. She had served Luis several times, though neither of them remembered the first. "Road report says chains above the summit," she said. "I heard plow came down 20 minutes ago. Going back up." June looked through the window. He did not say a driver at the end of the counter turned on his stool. He was thin with a white mustache and a green cap stained above the brim. Luis had seen his silver tractor outside. The trailer carried the name Keenan Valley Produce. "North side is worse," the driver said. "Wind is moving everything back onto the road." Luis asked whether he had come through it. "About an hour ago. I stopped to clean my lights." The man introduced himself as Dale Haskins. He was hauling potatoes to Spokane. Dale had driven the route for 11 years. He knew the chain area's narrow shoulders and places where falling rocks collected after a thaw. He pointed at Luis's crackers. "You going to eat those?" Luis passed him the basket. Dale crushed 2 crackers into his coffee. Luis watched him stir. "That is a first. Doctor told me to stop eating pie. So you put crackers in coffee." Doctor was not specific. Dale's phone rang. He looked at the screen but did not answer. "My daughter," he said. "She calls if I am late. You should answer." I told her I was driving. "You are sitting." Dale slipped the phone into his coat. "She does not need every detail." June brought him a slice of apple pie. Luis raised an eyebrow. "The doctor lives in Oregon," Dale said. Luis finished his stew. Before leaving, he bought 2 slices of pie in cardboard boxes. One was for later. The other was for Nico, though it would probably be eaten before Luis returned home. Outside, the wind carried away the warmth from the diner door. Snow moved across the parking lot in pale sheets. Trucks stood beneath the lights with their engines running. Luis completed his inspection. He brushed snow from the trailer lights and checked the chains secured beneath the frame. Dale was doing the same beside his silver tractor. "See you on the other side," Dale called. Luis raised one hand. Dale left first. Luis waited another 15 minutes. He listened to the weather broadcast and watched 2 plows enter the highway. Then he pulled out behind them. Traffic moved slowly toward the pass. Tire chains struck the pavement in uneven rhythms. Snow filled the space between vehicles, making taillights appear and disappear. After several miles, one plow turned into a maintenance area. The other continued north. Luis followed at a safe distance. The road climbed through dark timber. Beyond the guardrail, the ground dropped toward a river that could not be seen from the cab. Luis knew it was there because he heard it during summer trips. That night, the snow covered even the river's voice. Luis passed the first chain area without stopping. His drive tires held the road. The trailer remained straight behind him. He switched off the radio. The wipers dragged across the windshield. Chains rattled beneath other trucks. Wind rubbed against the trailer walls with a low, hollow note. Near the summit, the plow slowed and moved onto the shoulder. Its yellow lights disappeared behind Luis as he continued north. The next few miles were empty. Luis leaned forward over the steering wheel. His headlights reached only as far as the next curve. Snow came directly toward the glass, creating the impression that the truck was standing still. A burst of static came through the Citizens Band radio. Luis adjusted the volume. No voice followed. A few minutes later, he heard another brief burst. It sounded like someone pressing a microphone button without speaking. "Northbound near the summit, you need help," Luis asked. Only static returned. He repeated the question. The radio clicked once, then went quiet. Luis rounded a bend near mile marker 212. Something reflective flashed on the shoulder. Then he saw the hazard lights. A silver tractor sat partly in the travel lane. Its trailer angled toward the guardrail. Snow had begun collecting on the rear doors, but the engine was still running. Keenan Valley Produce, Luis slowed and stopped several truck lengths behind it. He activated his own hazard lights and called over the radio. "Dale, this is Luis from the diner." No answer. He tried again. The silver truck did not move. Luis called emergency services before leaving his cab. He gave the location, carrier name, and road conditions. The dispatcher said a trooper was coming from the north side of the pass. It could take more than half an hour. Luis put on his coat, reflective vest, gloves, and wool cap. He took a flashlight from the compartment behind his seat. The wind reached him as soon as he opened the door. He heard Dale's engine. He heard the hazard relay clicking inside the cab. Each click came at the same pace as the flashing lights. Luis walked along the shoulder. Snow covered the road markings. He kept one hand on the trailer to avoid stepping into traffic. The driver's door stood open. "Dale!" The cab's warning chime sounded because the door was open with the key in the ignition. Dale was not inside. Luis climbed onto the step and shone his light through the cab. A thermos rested in the cup holder. The lower bunk had been prepared for sleep. An open food container sat on the passenger seat. Steam still rose from the stew inside it. Dale's phone was plugged into the dashboard. The screen showed a missed call from someone named Maddie. His green cap lay on the floor. Luis called his name again. Nothing answered from the road. He stepped down and inspected the truck. There was no visible damage. The tires were inflated. The trailer had not touched the guardrail. Footprints led from the open door. The snow preserved the tread of each boot. Dale had walked around the front of the tractor, crossed the northbound lane, and climbed over the guardrail on the opposite side. Luis followed them to the road. No traffic approached. He crossed carefully. The footprints continued down an embankment toward the trees. There was only one set. No other prints came from the forest or returned toward the highway. Luis aimed the flashlight between the trunks. "Dale." The name traveled a short distance before the snow absorbed it. Luis called the emergency dispatcher again. He reported the footprints and described the direction they went. "Do not follow them alone," she said. Luis looked back at the open cab. The warning chime continued to sound. Its steady notes carried across the highway. Then he heard a second sound. It came from below the embankment. A branch snapped. Luis moved his flashlight toward it. Snow fell from a pine bough. Nothing crossed the beam. "Dale, answer me." A voice came through the trees. Luis could not understand the word. It was low and brief, no louder than someone speaking from another room. He stepped over the guardrail. The snow reached above his ankles. Dale's footprints were easy to follow. They descended between the trees without slipping or changing direction. Luis moved 20 yards from the road. The truck engines became quieter. The hazard lights flashed through the branches behind him. Red light, darkness. Red light. Luis found one of Dale's gloves beside a tree. It lay palm up in the snow. He picked it up. The inside was still warm. The prints continued down the slope. Luis called again. This time something answered from his left. It sounded like his own name. He turned the flashlight toward the sound. The beam moved across tree trunks, low branches, and falling snow. There were no footprints in that direction. Luis backed toward the highway. He kept the light pointed into the trees until his shoulder struck the guardrail. The trooper arrived several minutes later. A county rescue team followed with a search dog and winter equipment. Luis gave them the glove. The dog followed Dale's footprints into the forest. Its handler disappeared between the trees. The other searchers spread along the slope. After 40 minutes, the dog returned. It led the handler back to Dale's open truck. The handler tried again. The same thing happened. By then, new snow had softened the footprints. The storm covered them completely before sunrise. Search crews remained on the mountain for 3 days. They checked the river, drainage channels, service roads, and abandoned structures below the pass. They found no coat, boots, blood, or broken branches. Dale's wallet remained in the sleeper. His phone showed that his daughter had called 4 times. The food on the passenger seat had come from a container packed at home. The truck's forward camera recorded the stop. It showed the vehicle pulling onto the shoulder without swerving. The engine remained running. The camera had no view of the driver's door. Its microphone recorded the door opening, the warning chime, and Dale stepping onto the road. Before he walked away, he spoke one sentence. Investigators played it for Luis. "Someone is down there," Dale had said. No other voice appeared on the recording. Luis still stops when he sees a truck stranded in bad weather. He calls for help and waits beside the highway, but he no longer follows footprints beyond the guardrail. Snow can preserve a person's final direction while hiding everything that waited beyond it. Each winter, before Luis crosses that pass, he turns off the radio near mile marker 212 and listens for a voice beneath the trees. Calvin Reed's Citizens Band radio had a loose speaker on smooth pavement. It sounded normal on rough roads. Something inside the casing vibrated against the dashboard. The result was a faint metallic buzz beneath every voice. Calvin had planned to repair it for 6 months. He kept a screwdriver in the center console for that purpose. Each time he stopped, something else demanded his attention. A delivery receipt, a fuel message, a call from home. By the time he remembered the speaker, he was moving again. That night, the buzz followed him north from Fort Worth. He was hauling boxed auto parts to a warehouse outside Amarillo. The load was light, and the delivery window was generous. He had accepted it because the route would place him near his daughter's town the following morning. Abby was 9. Her school was holding a music program at noon. She had been assigned the triangle. Calvin had asked whether the triangle was difficult. "You hit it once," she said. "That sounds difficult to mess up." You would find a way. Abby had inherited his timing. Calvin planned to park near the school and sit in the back row. He had not told her he was coming. If the warehouse delayed him, she would never know he had tried. He stopped for dinner at a travel plaza north of Wichita Falls. Before going inside, he wiped the dust from his boots with a small yellow brush. Abby had used to clean her pony's saddle during a summer camp. The pony had bitten her shirt. Abby thought this made them friends. Calvin kept the brush beneath his seat because it still had her name written on the handle. Inside the travel plaza, the restaurant had closed its kitchen. Calvin bought a turkey sandwich, chocolate milk, and a packet of salted peanuts. The night clerk watched him place everything on the counter. "Breakfast of champions," she said. "It is after midnight. This could be any meal." Her name tag read Mel. She had worked there long enough to recognize several drivers by their coffee orders. "You look tired," she said. Calvin examined his reflection in the dark window behind her. The overhead light showed gray beneath his eyes. "I look experienced. Experience usually knows when to sleep. I am stopping in Amarillo." Mel placed the receipt on the counter. "Amarillo is not here." Calvin smiled, folded the receipt, and tucked it into his wallet. He had slept 4 hours that afternoon. The night before, he had slept 5. It was not enough, but it was not unusual. At the truck, he ate the sandwich in the driver's seat. He removed the tomato first and placed it in the empty wrapper. Warm tomatoes made bread taste like wet paper. He called Abby. Her mother answered and said Abby was already asleep. Calvin asked her to pass along one message. "Tell her to hold the triangle by the string. Not the metal. She knows. I am offering professional advice. You drive a truck. Exactly. Mostly metal." After the call, Calvin set an alarm for 20 minutes. He leaned his seat back and closed his eyes. The alarm seemed to sound immediately. Calvin sat up and drank half the chocolate milk. He walked around the truck, checked the trailer, then splashed cold water on his face inside the restroom. At 1 in the morning, he returned to the highway. The road north was mostly empty. Dry grass moved along the shoulders. Utility lights appeared far across the fields, too distant to reveal the buildings beneath them. Calvin listened to a country station until the signal weakened. Then he switched on the Citizens Band radio. The speaker buzzed. A few drivers discussed a speed trap near Vernon. Someone asked about a place to buy coffee. Another person transmitted music until several drivers told him to stop. Calvin kept the volume low. Near a dark construction zone, the radio clicked. A man's voice came through the speaker. Mattress in the right lane. Move left. The voice was calm and close. The loose speaker gave it the same metallic edge as every other transmission. Calvin changed lanes. He asked for the location, but no one answered. A little more than 2 minutes later, his headlights found a mattress lying across the right lane. One corner lifted in the wind each time a vehicle passed. Calvin drove around it. "Good call," he said into the microphone. Static followed. The warning had been accurate. That was common on truck routes. Drivers reported debris, disabled vehicles, animals, and police activity throughout the night. Calvin continued north. 20 minutes later, the same voice returned. "Black calf beside the fence. It stays on the shoulder." Calvin looked ahead. His headlights showed only pavement. He pressed the microphone button. "What mile marker?" No response came. A black calf appeared near the next curve. It stood outside a broken section of fence, its head lowered toward the grass. The animal did not enter the road. Calvin passed slowly. Something about the driver's voice stayed with him. It had flattened certain words in the same way Calvin did. The speaker buzz made comparison difficult. He increased the volume. "Driver calling the calf. What are you hauling?" No answer. Calvin checked the road ahead for taillights. There were none. The warning could have come from a driver traveling south. Radio signals did not follow traffic lanes. Someone at a truck stop could have heard another report and repeated it. Calvin adjusted the air vent toward his face. For the next half hour, the radio remained quiet. He reached a long stretch of highway where the pavement ran straight to the horizon. The dashboard clock read a few minutes after 2. The radio clicked. "Construction sign is down. Sharp edge facing traffic." Calvin's right hand stopped above the volume control. The voice belonged to him. It was not merely similar. The speaker reproduced the same small catch in his throat that appeared when he had been awake too long. Calvin picked up the microphone. "Identify yourself." The radio buzzed. Then his own voice said, "You left the tomato in the wrapper." Calvin looked at the passenger seat. The sandwich wrapper lay inside a plastic bag. The tomato was still visible through the opening. He reached for the radio power switch. Before his finger touched it, the voice spoke again. "Do not turn it off." Calvin pulled the power cable from the back of the unit. The speaker went dead. He drove with both hands on the wheel. The air vent blew against his eyes until they watered. A fallen construction sign appeared near the center line. One metal support pointed upward. Calvin moved onto the shoulder to avoid it. He did not stop at the next travel center. Calvin parked near the fuel lanes. He bought coffee and carried the Citizens Band radio inside. Mel was not working there. A young cashier sat behind the counter reading a magazine. 2 drivers stood near the coffee machines. One wore a denim jacket with the name Deacon stitched above the pocket. Calvin placed the radio on a table and inspected the casing. No second device had been attached. The microphone cable showed no damage. Deacon watched him remove the back panel. "LOSA signal?" he asked. "Found one." Calvin explained that another driver had been calling hazards ahead of him. He did not mention the tomato. "What did he sound like?" Deacon asked. "Me." Deacon stirred powdered creamer into his cup. "You record it." Calvin remembered that his phone had been mounted beside the radio. The camera was not running, but a voice memo application had been recording a message. He intended to send Abby. He had forgotten to stop it after leaving the earlier travel plaza. Calvin found the file. He played the section containing the first warning. His own voice came through the phone speaker. "Mattress in the right lane, move left." Deacon listened to the next warning. Then he looked at Calvin. "That came from your radio?" "Yes, you answer it, yes." Deacon handed back the phone. "I would stop doing that." Calvin sat in the truck for nearly an hour. He drank the coffee and set another alarm. This time he did not sleep. At 3:30 he rejoined the highway. The radio remained unplugged on the passenger seat. Calvin drove 10 miles before he heard a click. He looked at the radio. The unit was dark. The click came again. It was the sound of his own microphone button beneath his left thumb. Calvin had picked up the microphone without remembering it. The cable hung loose because the radio had no power. He dropped it onto the seat. Ahead, 2 red taillights appeared over a rise. They belonged to a tractor pulling a white box trailer. It traveled at the same speed as Calvin. No company markings showed on the rear doors. Calvin watched it for several minutes. When he accelerated, the distance between them remained unchanged. When he slowed, the taillights moved no farther away. The unpowered speaker buzzed. Calvin turned toward it. His own voice came through, faint but clear. "There I am." The truck ahead passed beneath a highway light. Its tractor was the same dark blue as Calvin's. The white trailer carried a vertical stain near the left door, matching a mark on his own trailer. Calvin pressed his palm against the steering wheel. The radio spoke again. "Follow me at the next turn." An exit sign appeared ahead. It marked a county road with no services. The truck took the ramp. Calvin remained on the highway. His hands held the wheel straight. The taillights moved along the frontage road beside him. The road curved toward the highway again. The truck should have passed beneath a line of lights. It did not appear. "Next turn," the voice repeated. Calvin drove past the exit. The radio began describing the road ahead, a dead mesquite tree, a stranded pickup, a bridge with a missing reflector. Each appeared several minutes later. Then the voice said, "Road bends left. Do not." Calvin approached the bend. A narrow service road continued straight beyond the curve. Fresh tire tracks crossed the shoulder toward it. Red taillights waited in the distance. Calvin's right foot lifted from the accelerator. The truck drifted toward the shoulder. His tires touched the rumble strip. The vibration shook the cab. The yellow brush beneath his seat slid across the floor and struck his boot. Calvin turned the wheel left. He remained on the highway. The service road passed beside him. Beyond the waiting taillights, the pavement ended at a washed-out culvert. Calvin saw them disappear as his headlights crossed the gap. He drove to the next town and parked outside a sheriff's office. He slept until late morning and missed Abby's performance. The voice recording remained on his phone. It contained every warning, including the final instruction. At several points, Calvin's replies overlapped the other voice. Both voices were his. Calvin no longer accepts overnight routes through the Texas Panhandle. The Citizens Band radio remains beneath his bunk with red tape wrapped around its power cable. Fatigue can place distance between a driver and his own decisions. The road continues moving while that distance grows. Before every night trip, Calvin checks beneath his seat for Abby's yellow brush, then waits for sunrise before he puts the truck in gear. Mara Bell heard the generator before she saw the lights. It ran somewhere beyond the travel center, hidden behind the fuel tanks and a line of cottonwood trees. The sound came in uneven pulses, a low mechanical churn, a pause. Then another churn. Mara had been driving since noon. Her trailer carried bottled water from Kansas City to a grocery distribution center in western Colorado. The delivery was scheduled for the following afternoon, but a storm had closed 2 mountain routes. Every truck heading west had stopped early. The main parking lot was full. Mara circled twice and passed a row of trucks waiting on the entrance shoulder. Drivers stood outside their cabs with coffee cups and phones held toward the sky. She had no interest in spending the night beside traffic. Mara drove a third loop looking for space. She did not like crowded lots. Crowded lots meant doors opening close to her cab. They meant strangers stepping between trailers. They meant someone could stand behind her truck without being seen. Her own rules were simple: park beneath a light. Keep the nose pointed toward an exit. Eat before the food. Cooled call her daughter before sleep. She had followed those rules since the first year she started driving alone. At the far end of the travel center, a hand-painted sign pointed toward an unmarked gravel road, overflow parking. The arrow was crooked. The letters had been brushed onto plywood and covered with clear tape. Mara followed it past the diesel pumps. The road narrowed between 2 rows of trees. The generator grew louder. Gravel struck the underside of her truck. Beyond the trees, a broad field opened beneath the dark sky. Several trucks were parked there. None had company markings. A man in a red jacket stood beside a small booth made from corrugated metal. He lifted a flashlight toward Mara's windshield. She lowered her window. "Overflow lot?" she asked. "Park anywhere along the fence." "Is there a fee?" "Not tonight." The man's voice carried a rough rasp. He wrote something on a clipboard without asking her name. Mara watched the flashlight beam move down the side of her truck. "Any other drivers back there?" The man looked past her toward the road. "Leave before the morning rush," he said. Mara did not ask why. She chose a place near the fence beneath a pole with no bulb. Another truck sat 20 yards away. Its cab curtains were closed. No engine ran. Mara backed in and set the brakes. The field was quieter than the main lot. The highway sounded distant. Snow moved across the gravel in thin lines. She stepped down with her phone, a paper bag, and the small black notebook she kept in the side pocket of her coat. Before opening the trailer, she checked the seal. Then she climbed into the cab. Mara's daughter Tessa had sent a voice message while she was parking. A puppy in her neighborhood had learned to open the laundry room door. Tessa described the event in great detail. She explained which neighbor had witnessed it and what color the puppy's collar was. Mara listened twice. She had been divorced for 4 years. Tessa stayed with her father during the school week and with Mara whenever the route allowed. Their conversations were often short. Their details were not. Mara wrote the puppy's name in her notebook, Peaches. Then she warmed a bowl of soup in the small microwave beneath the bunk. She kept a metal spoon in the glove compartment because the plastic ones at truck stops bent against thick food. While the soup heated, she folded her route paperwork into a square and placed it beneath the windshield. Her old trainer, Jessa Quinlan, had taught her to keep documents visible. Jessa had disappeared 3 years earlier. Her truck had been found outside Flagstaff, unlocked and empty. Her purse was on the seat. Her phone was charging. The investigation had produced no body and no clear direction. Mara had not spoken about Jessa in years. She still folded paperwork the way Jessa had shown her. The microwave beeped. Mara stirred the soup and looked through the windshield. The unmarked trucks remained still. A line of trees separated the overflow lot from the travel center. No lights showed through the branches. She called Tessa. The conversation lasted 6 minutes. Tessa asked whether Mara had reached the mountains. Mara said she was still in Kansas. Tessa asked whether it snowed there. Mara looked at the windshield. Enough to make the road look unfinished. Tessa laughed. Before hanging up, Mara promised to call again in the morning. She locked the doors and lowered the curtains. The generator continued beyond the trees. At 2:20 in the morning, Mara woke to a metallic knock beneath the truck. She sat up. Another knock followed. The sound came from outside, not from the trailer. It moved along the frame in 3 short taps. Mara waited with one hand on the curtain. The generator churned wind rubbed against the cab. Somewhere near the fence, loose wire struck a pole. She turned on the dashboard light. The parking field looked empty. Mara checked the mirrors. The other truck remained dark. She listened for footsteps. Nothing approached. She lay down again. 20 minutes later, she heard a door close. The sound came from the trees. Mara pulled on her boots and looked through the narrow curtain gap. A pale light moved between the trunks. It traveled from the direction of the travel center toward the far side of the field. The light disappeared behind a parked cab. Mara reached for her phone. The signal showed 1 bar. She opened the map application. The blue dot remained fixed on the gravel road, but the road itself did not appear on the map. Mara zoomed in. The field was blank. She took a photograph through the windshield. The pale light did not appear in the picture. Mara waited until dawn. The generator stopped just before sunrise. Without it, the field became unnaturally still. The highway noise returned. Trucks on the interstate passed at regular intervals, their tires hissing over wet pavement. Mara opened the door. Cold air entered the cab. She checked the ground around the truck. There were no footprints near the steps. The man in the red jacket was gone. His booth stood open. A folding chair leaned against one wall. A clipboard rested on a metal shelf. Mara walked toward the trees. She expected to find a second parking row or a storage yard. The road continued behind the cottonwoods and ended at a rusted gate. Beyond the gate stood a collection of old tractors and box trailers. Some were missing wheels. Some leaned into the weeds. Several had their doors open. Mara stopped at the gate. The generator had not come from the travel center. It had been connected to a small office trailer near the center of the yard. The office windows were covered with cardboard. A padlock hung open from the door. Mara called the travel center. No one answered. She walked through the gate. Snow had collected inside the abandoned trailers. Plastic straps moved against the walls. Loose metal struck in the wind. The office trailer smelled of dust, cold coffee, and damp cardboard. Mara stood in the doorway and listened. A clock ticked somewhere inside. The first room contained a folding table, a gas heater, and several rows of metal shelves. The shelves were filled with ordinary objects: wallets, key rings, work gloves, toothbrushes, prescription bottles. Small photographs, pocket knives, receipts folded into squares. Each object rested inside a clear plastic bag. Some bags had names written on them. Mara stepped closer. The first name meant nothing to her. The second belonged to a driver she had seen on a missing person notice at a truck stop in Arizona. The third belonged to a man who had worked for the same carrier as Jessa. Mara removed her glove. She did not touch the bag. A red scarf lay beneath it. Jessa had owned a red scarf. Mara remembered because Jessa wore it tied around her hair during loading inspections. She had not seen that scarf since the night Jessa disappeared. Mara moved to the next shelf. The objects were arranged by date. Some dates were written in blue ink. Others had been scratched into the plastic with a sharp tool. The most recent bags held items that looked newly collected: a fuel receipt from the previous week, a cracked pair of sunglasses, a motel key card, a wedding ring with a dark stone. Mara turned toward the window. The yard remained empty. A vehicle moved on the highway beyond the trees, but it was too far away to identify. She returned to the table. A ledger lay open beside the gas heater. The pages contained names, truck numbers, and times. No destinations were listed. The final page had only 3 entries: a white tractor, a red flatbed, a blue water hauler. Mara looked toward the yard. Her truck was blue. She stepped away from the ledger. A sound came from the outer room. 2 slow knocks against the metal wall. Mara picked up her phone. The signal had disappeared. The office trailer door shifted behind her. She moved toward it without making a sound. A shadow crossed the cardboard-covered window. Mara held her breath until her chest began to ache. The shadow stopped. Then a man spoke outside. "You leaving?" His voice belonged to the man in the red jacket. Mara looked at the shelves. The door had no lock on the inside. She reached for the gas heater and turned the valve. The flame died. The man knocked once. Mara stepped backward toward a second door at the rear of the office trailer. The door opened onto the yard. A chain wrapped around the outside handle, but the chain was loose enough to lift. She raised it carefully. The man outside moved toward the front door. Mara pulled the rear door open and stepped into the cold. Snow reached over the tops of her boots. She crossed behind the nearest trailer and stayed low. The man entered the office. She heard the front door strike the wall. Then the shelves began to rattle. Mara moved toward the gate. At the edge of the yard, she looked back. The man in the red jacket stood beside the office trailer. He held the ledger beneath one arm. He did not chase her. He only watched the path. She took through the snow. Mara reached her truck and locked the door behind her. Her hand slipped twice on the key. She started the engine, backed onto the gravel road, and drove toward the travel center. The main lot was crowded with morning traffic. A fuel truck moved between the pumps. The restaurant lights were on. Mara pulled beside the office and entered the store. The clerk behind the counter was a different man. Mara asked for the manager. He pointed toward a door beside the restrooms. A woman in a blue uniform came out. Mara described the overflow lot, the office, and the items on the shelves. The woman listened without interrupting. "There is no overflow lot," she said. Mara looked through the front windows. "Your sign sent me there." The woman followed her gaze. The plywood sign was gone. Mara called the sheriff's office. Deputies arrived before noon. They followed the route through the cottonwoods and found the rusted gate. The abandoned yard existed, but the office trailer stood empty. No ledger, no shelves of plastic bags, no man in a red jacket. The trailers contained broken furniture, rotting pallets, and rusted equipment. Snow covered the floor where Mara said she had stood. One deputy found a red scarf caught on a nail near the office door. Mara identified it as Jessa's. The deputy placed it in an evidence bag. The owner of the travel center said the land had belonged to a towing company decades earlier. He denied knowing anyone who used it. The hand-painted sign was never found. Mara did not miss the warehouse appointment. She delivered the bottled water and drove home 2 days later. She did not tell Tessa about the office that evening. Mara removed the folded route paper from beneath her windshield. A blue water hauler was written on it in black ink. Below the words, someone had added a departure time. Mara has not parked in an unmarked lot, since every truck stop looks different after midnight, but the same question waits beyond the lights. A place can be called overflow because it holds what people do not want seen. Before sleeping, Mara now photographs the ground around her truck and keeps the doors unlocked until she knows which way she will run. Jonah Price woke before the alarm because the house had become too quiet. His wife Callie slept in the room at the front of the trailer. The refrigerator clicked once in the kitchen. Rain moved along the roof in a steady line. Jonah lay still and listened. He had spent most of his life around machines. He knew the sounds of a loose belt, a tired bearing, a pump losing pressure. He knew when a truck idled unevenly and when a chain had gone slack. The house made fewer sounds than a truck. That was why he never trusted it before dawn. Jonah rose at 4 and walked into the kitchen. He filled a chipped blue thermos with coffee and placed 2 pieces of toast in a paper bag. Callie had written a note on the bag, "Do not forget the apples." Jonah placed 3 apples beside the toast. He had been hauling timber for 28 years. During that time, he had developed a habit of carrying food in exact numbers. 2 sandwiches, 3 apples, 4 bottles of water, Callie said. The habit came from growing up poor. Jonah said it came from counting fuel stops. She knew better. Before leaving, he stepped into the bedroom and kissed her forehead. Callie opened one eye. "Fog tonight," she said. "Not until dark, that is still tonight." Jonah smiled. Their grandson Eli had slept on the couch. He was 6 and had spent the weekend learning to whistle. He could produce a thin breath but no note. Jonah touched the boy's shoulder. Eli stirred without waking. One hand rested around a plastic toy truck. Jonah left quietly. The logging yard stood below, Black Mountain, where the road narrowed between the trees and the creek stayed close to the pavement. Jonah's truck was an old red Kenworth, with a flatbed trailer and a dent near the rear axle. The dent came from a deer. The deer had continued into the woods. Jonah had not at the yard. His coworker, Ben Rusk, was already waiting beside the loading crane. Ben was 67, with a gray beard and a habit of sharpening the same pocket knife every morning. The crane lifted the first bundle of timber. Wood struck metal with a heavy hollow sound. Ben checked the chains. "Road is wet above the ridge," he said. "So am I. Do not stop near the second switchback." Jonah looked at him. Ben pulled the chain tight. Loose rock. Jonah had driven that road hundreds of times. He knew every bend, culvert, and washout. What changed? Nothing changes up there, that is the problem. Ben finished the inspection and walked away. By 6, Jonah had a full load of hickory and poplar. He drove it down to the mill unloaded, then returned for a second run. The work continued through the afternoon. Rain stopped before sunset. Fog gathered between the trees. Jonah ate 1 sandwich beside the loading crane. He saved the second for the drive home. Callie called while he was securing the final chain. "Ellie found a whistle," she said. "Did he learn how to use it?" "He says he has." That is not an answer. He has learned how to annoy the dog. Jonah looked toward the woods. A blue jay moved through the upper branches. "Tell him I will hear it when I get home. He wants you to bring a mountain name." "A mountain name?" "He says every truck driver has one." Jonah considered this. "Tell him mine is Old Gear." Callie laughed. Jonah liked hearing her laugh more than he liked the name. He finished the call and climbed into the cab. The road home was 11 miles. During daylight, the distance felt short. At night, Black Mountain added its own measurement. Jonah switched on the headlights and eased away from the yard. The forest closed around him. The engine pulled against the incline. Chains creaked behind the cab. Water ran beneath the tires in narrow streams. Branches tapped the trailer roof where the road passed beneath low trees. Jonah kept the radio off. He preferred hearing the truck. At the first switchback, something moved through the brush beside the road. Jonah saw only a dark shape between tree trunks. A few seconds later, he heard it, 4 quick taps against the pavement, then 2. The sound stayed beside the truck for several seconds and faded behind him. Jonah checked the mirrors. The road behind him was empty. He continued upward. At the second switchback, the engine worked harder. Jonah downshifted and felt the trailer pull against the chains. A soft scratching sound rose beside the passenger door. It resembled claws moving across wet asphalt. Jonah lowered the window. Cold air entered the cab. He heard water, wind, and the steady pull of the engine. The scratching stopped. Jonah raised the window and looked into the right mirror. A black dog ran beside the trailer. It was large, but not unusually so. Its back reached the bottom edge of the mirror. Its head remained level with the cab, though the road climbed sharply. The dog's coat appeared almost blue beneath the headlights. Jonah expected it to fall behind. It did not. He reduced his speed. The dog matched him. He accelerated. The dog matched him again. Jonah looked toward the passenger window. The trees moved in a dark blur. He could not see the animal directly, only in the mirror. The road bent left. The dog disappeared behind the trailer. Jonah checked the mirror again. Nothing. He drove another quarter-mile. At the top of the ridge, the fog thickened. It reached across the road in long, pale strips. Jonah turned on the auxiliary lights. The dog appeared in the right mirror. It ran beside the trailer as if it had been there the entire time. Jonah pressed the brake. The dog stopped. Its head remained forward. It did not look at him. Jonah stopped the truck completely. The engine idled. The trailer chains settled. The dog stood in the mirror, one front paw lifted. Jonah waited for it to turn. It did not. A truck approached from behind. Headlights grew through the fog. Jonah started moving before the other vehicle reached him. The dog vanished. At the bottom of the ridge, Jonah stopped at a small fuel station near the county line. The main building was closed, but the pumps remained active. He filled the tank and cleaned the right mirror with a paper towel. The mirror was wet with rain. No paw marks showed on the side of the truck inside the cab. He called Ben. Ben answered after several rings. "You saw it?" Ben asked. Jonah remained quiet. Ben did not repeat the question. "What do people call it?" Jonah asked. "Depends on the person. What do you call it?" Ben breathed into the phone. "The dog of Black Mountain. That tells me nothing. It is not supposed to." Jonah looked through the windshield at the dark station. Ben continued. "If it runs in the right mirror, keep driving. Why? Because stopping gives it a place to stand." The call ended. Jonah drove home without seeing the dog again. Callie was awake when he entered. She stood beside the kitchen sink with one of Eli's toy trucks in her hand. "You took long enough," she said. "Fog. Did you bring a mountain name, old gear?" "That is terrible." Ellie appeared in the hallway wearing striped pajamas. He held the plastic whistle to his lips and blew. The sound was thin and sharp. Jonah looked toward the front window. The glass reflected the kitchen light. Beyond it, the yard was dark. The next evening, Jonah returned to the mountain. He told himself the dog had been an ordinary animal, a large one, a stray, a shape altered by a mirror and fog. He had driven tired before. He had mistaken branches for people and deer for road signs. The explanation did not need help. At the loading yard, Ben was not there. A younger driver named Mason checked the chains for him. Mason had worked on the mountain less than a year. "Ben say anything about the ridge?" Jonah asked. Mason looked toward the road. "He said not to stop near the second switchback. Loose rock." Mason nodded. Jonah did not ask whether Ben had mentioned the dog. The second load was heavier than the first. The timber shifted once while Jonah tightened the chains. He stopped and secured it again. By the time he left the yard, the sky had gone black. Rain had returned. Jonah kept the radio silent. At the first bend, he heard the scratching sound beside the cab. He did not look at the mirror. The sound continued. 3 scratches, a pause, 3 more. Jonah held the wheel with both hands. The road climbed at the second switchback. He looked. The dog ran beside the trailer. This time its mouth was open. No breath showed in the cold air. Its paws struck the road without splashing through the water. Jonah kept driving. The animal stayed level with him. The fog closed around the cab. The road ahead became a narrow gray tunnel. Jonah could no longer see the trees beyond the shoulder. A sharp crack sounded above him. Rocks struck the trailer roof. Jonah braked hard. The truck stopped before the bend. More stones fell from the hillside. Small pieces bounced across the road. A larger section of wet earth slumped onto the pavement 20 yards ahead. Jonah looked into the right mirror. The dog stood beside the rear wheels. It had stopped before the falling rock. Jonah stepped out of the cab. Rain struck his coat. The engine idled behind him. The dog did not appear anywhere beside the truck. Only the mirror showed it. Jonah took 1 step toward the front of the cab. The dog moved closer in the reflection. He stopped. The animal's head remained pointed toward the blocked road. Its ears were flat against its skull. Jonah heard another sound. A truck engine approached from beyond the fog. No headlights appeared. The sound grew louder. Air brakes released somewhere ahead of the fallen rock. Jonah climbed back into the cab and locked the door. The dog disappeared from the mirror. The approaching engine stopped. For several seconds, Jonah heard nothing but rain on the roof. Then 3 taps struck the passenger door. Jonah did not turn. 3 more taps came from the trailer. He waited with his hand over the gear selector. A voice rose through the radio. The unit was switched off. "Do not take the lower road." Jonah's fingers tightened. Ben's voice had a rough rasp. Mason spoke too quickly. Callie's voice was softer. This voice sounded like Jonah. He started the truck. The road behind him remained open. The lower road began near the ridge and curved down toward an old quarry. Drivers used it when the main route was blocked. Jonah had used it once in daylight. The radio clicked again. "Stay on the ridge." Jonah moved forward. He eased the truck around the rockfall using the shoulder. The trailer passed within inches of the wet hillside. On the other side, the dog appeared in the right mirror. It ran ahead of the trailer. Now Jonah watched the reflection. The animal kept to the edge of the road. It never looked back. Near the summit, it stopped beside a broken guardrail. Jonah slowed. The dog stepped through the rail. Its body disappeared into the fog. The mirror showed an empty road. Jonah continued. At home, he parked beneath the porch light. Callie opened the door before he reached it. "You are bleeding," she said. Jonah looked down. A thin line of blood ran from his right palm. He had gripped the steering wheel so tightly that the skin had split against the worn leather. He washed his hand at the sink. Eli stood nearby with the plastic whistle. "Did you hear me on the mountain?" he asked. Jonah wrapped a towel around his palm. "Not tonight." The following morning, county crews cleared the rockfall. They found no animal tracks near the broken guardrail. Ben said nothing when Jonah told him about the dog. He only sharpened his pocket knife. Jonah stopped driving after dark. He transferred to daytime loads and accepted lower pay for shorter routes. The habit followed him home. He checked the right mirror before turning into the driveway. He checked it again before shutting off the engine. Mountain roads do not need a ghost to make a person doubt what the eyes report. A reflection can hold a second version of the road, one that asks to be trusted. Before every trip, Jonah now hangs a red shop rag over the right mirror and removes it only after the sun has reached the trees. Sadie Vance heard the weather before she saw it. Wind struck the truck stop windows in long, uneven bursts. The fuel canopies creaked above the pumps. Somewhere beyond the building, a loose metal sign tapped against its post. The sky was clear when she arrived. That was how Wyoming handled winter. The road could change while the coffee was still hot. Sadie had been driving since sunrise, hauling medical supplies from Salt Lake City toward Rapid City. Her trailer carried sealed cartons of insulin, bandages, and hospital linens. The refrigeration unit held a steady temperature behind the cab. She had accepted the route because it passed near her brother's farm. Owen had promised to send her a photograph of the greenhouse he had built behind the barn. The greenhouse was made from old storm windows and 2x4s. Owen called it temporary. It had survived 3 winters. Sadie kept the photograph he sent beneath the clear plastic on her dashboard. It showed rows of tomato seedlings beneath yellow work lights. She looked at it whenever the road became too empty. Inside the truck stop, Sadie ordered a cinnamon roll and black coffee. She ate the roll in small pieces, folding the paper wrapper into a square between bites. Her mother had taught her to fold paper that way. Sadie had been folding wrappers for 20 years. A dispatcher named Paul called while she was finishing the coffee. "Road report changed," he said. "Which road?" "Everything west of Elk Mountain." Sadie looked through the windows. Snow had begun collecting along the edge of the parking lot. "How bad?" "Bad enough that the plows are waiting." "How long?" Paul exhaled. "Could be an hour. Could be all night." Sadie checked the temperature display on the refrigeration unit. The cargo remained within range. It would stay there for several hours without trouble. She asked whether the delivery window could be moved. Paul said he would call the hospital. "I am not asking you to take the pass," he said. "I am telling you to stay put." Sadie looked at the highway entrance. A line of trucks moved past the fuel pumps. Their headlights were still visible through the falling snow. "I hear you," she said. Paul knew that phrase. It meant she understood the order and might ignore it. Before leaving the restaurant, Sadie called Owen. He answered from the greenhouse. Wind moved around his phone. "You see the picture?" he asked. "I am looking at it. Those tomatoes are alive. Congratulations. You should stop by in the morning. I might be late. Then stop by in the afternoon." Sadie smiled. Owen had been asking her to visit for 3 years. He never asked why she did not. She told him the weather was turning. Owen said the road would still be there tomorrow. Sadie ended the call and returned to the truck. She checked the tires, air lines, trailer seal, and refrigeration unit. Snow had gathered on the mirror housings. She brushed it away with her sleeve. The wind pushed across the lot. A truck beside the fuel island released its brakes. The air hissed through the cold. Sadie climbed into the cab and turned on the heater. Paul called again. "State Patrol is closing the pass," he said. "Stay where you are. The closure is north of here. It is moving this direction." Sadie looked at the dashboard photograph of the greenhouse. She had spent 11 hours driving toward an appointment that might not exist by morning. The supplies were important, but not so important that she should park inside a storm. She started the engine anyway. The road out of the truck stop remained clear. Sadie drove east first, then joined the highway where the plows had left narrow tracks. Snow fell harder after sunset. The world beyond the headlights became a wall of white. The road lines disappeared. The truck ahead of her showed only 2 red lights, then one, then none. Sadie reduced her speed. Her tires rolled over packed snow. The trailer followed with a gentle pull. The Citizens Band radio carried scattered voices. Drivers reported ice near the next hill. Someone asked whether the rest area was open. Another voice mentioned a jackknifed tanker. Sadie kept the volume low. A burst of static interrupted the channel. Then a man spoke. "Stay in the right lane. Left side is drifting." The voice sounded close and calm. Sadie glanced at her mirror. No truck traveled beside her. She looked ahead. The right lane was clearer than the left. Snow had gathered against the center line. "Who is that?" she asked. The radio answered with static. Sadie continued. A few minutes later, a truck passed in the opposite direction. Its headlights formed 2 pale circles in the snow. The driver flashed his lights twice. Sadie checked the right lane. A dark ridge of snow covered the left side. The unknown driver had been correct. She called Paul. The line broke several times before he answered. "Where are you?" 20 miles west of the summit. "You should have stopped." "I know," his voice sharpened. "Turn around if you can. There is traffic behind me. Then find a pullout." Sadie looked for one. The highway had narrowed between snowbanks. The shoulder vanished beneath the drift. A reflector post appeared at the edge of her headlights and disappeared again. The radio clicked. "Next turnout is 2 miles ahead." Sadie looked at the route display. The next marked turnout was 6 miles away. She drove on. The snow thickened until the windshield wipers moved through a liquid blur. Sadie opened the side window a few inches. The wind carried the road's condition into the cab. Ice tapped against the mirror. Snow hissed along the door. She heard the unknown driver again. "Turn after the fence." Sadie saw a line of wooden posts on the right. Beyond them, an opening led away from the highway. There was no sign, no reflector, no plowed surface. She kept going. A mile later, the highway stopped. Traffic ahead had gathered behind a line of emergency vehicles. Red lights pulsed through the whiteout. A state patrol truck blocked both lanes. Sadie came to a slow stop. She called Paul. The call connected, then broke apart. "Road is closed," he said. "Find a safe place and shut down." Sadie looked behind her. Trucks filled the road in both directions. The shoulder was buried. A state trooper walked along the line, waving vehicles toward the right. The unknown voice entered the radio. "Use the access road." Sadie saw the same fence opening ahead. A set of tire tracks led through it. "Is that a county road?" she asked. "Hard pack all the way to the service station." The voice sounded like a driver who had used it before. Sadie held the microphone. "What service station?" Static returned. The trooper reached her window and pointed through the opening. He shouted something, but the wind tore the words apart. Another truck moved onto the access road. Its taillights appeared through the snow. Sadie followed. The road had been plowed recently, but only once. Snow rose along both sides. The fence continued beside it, marked by thin posts with no reflectors. The unknown driver spoke again. "Keep your speed steady." Sadie drove at 15 miles per hour. The highway disappeared behind the blowing snow. No lights showed ahead except the red taillights of the truck in front of her. They remained far enough away to blur into the storm. The access road curved through open ground. Sadie checked her map. The road was not printed on it. Her navigation screen showed a blank stretch of land. She called Paul again. This time the call did not connect. The radio said, "Bridge ahead, stay left." Sadie saw no bridge. The truck in front of her continued through the whiteout. Its taillights dipped suddenly, then rose. Sadie slowed. The road surface beneath her tires changed. Packed snow became loose powder. She turned the wheel slightly left. The trailer moved behind her with a slow sideways pull. Sadie pressed the brakes. The truck stopped. The taillights ahead vanished. She waited for them to return. Nothing moved in the snow. The radio clicked. "Bridge is under the drift. Cross slowly." Sadie lowered the window. Wind struck her face. She heard water beneath the snow. Not a bridge, a covered wash. The sound came from the right side of the road. It ran below a thin shelf of ice and snow. Sadie shifted into reverse. The radio crackled. "Do not back up." Sadie placed both hands on the wheel. A line of fence posts stood beyond her trailer. The road behind her was still visible in the headlights. The road ahead ended at a white slope that dropped toward moving water. She reversed. The trailer began to swing. Sadie stopped, corrected, and reversed again. Snow pressed against the tires. The steering wheel shook in her hands. The unknown voice returned. "Left." Sadie looked at the road edge. There was no left. Only a snowbank and a field. She continued backward toward the highway. The radio became louder. "Left, Sadie." The use of her name changed the space inside the cab. She had not given it over the radio. Sadie switched off the unit. The voice continued for 3 seconds. Then the speaker died. She reversed until the access road widened near the fence. The tires slipped once. Sadie stopped, set the brakes, and climbed down with a shovel. Snow struck her legs. She cleared the tires by hand, working beneath the trailer with the shovel angled against the wind. The road behind her had nearly disappeared. When she returned to the cab, she found a fresh line of footprints beside the passenger door. They began at the front tire and continued toward the white field. Sadie had not made them. She looked toward the highway. A faint amber light moved through the storm. She climbed back in and activated her emergency beacon. The light pulsed above the cab. Sadie used the company satellite phone. It connected after several attempts. She gave her coordinates from the navigation screen. The dispatcher on the other end told her she was 6 miles from the highway and nearly 2 miles from any mapped road. "No one should have directed you there," the dispatcher said. Sadie looked at the dead radio. "I know." A rescue truck found her 40 minutes later. 2 county workers cleared the road enough for them to tow her back to the highway. The covered wash sat less than 50 yards beyond where she had stopped. The snow over it had collapsed by morning. The truck she had followed was never found. There were no tracks ahead of her except those made by her own tires. The access road showed no plow marks beyond the first curve. Paul did not mention the route again. Sadie completed the delivery 3 days late. The hospital accepted the supplies without comment. At Owen's farm, the greenhouse windows had held. The tomato seedlings stood beneath their yellow lights. Sadie stayed for one night. She did not tell him about the footprints. She told him the weather had been worse than expected. Since then, Sadie parks at the first safe lot before a storm closes in. She keeps a paper map folded beside the driver's seat and writes the nearest mile marker on the windshield with a grease pencil. The radio microphone stays inside her lunch cooler, wrapped in a dish towel. Snow can erase a highway while leaving the illusion of a road somewhere else. In a whiteout, a calm voice can sound like guidance simply because it speaks without hesitation. When the first flakes cover the center line, Sadie turns off the radio and listens only to the tires. Walter Briggs heard the tapping beneath the fuel pumps. It was not the regular click of the pump handle or the hiss of a diesel tank filling. It came from the white trailer parked at the far end of the island. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. Walter stood with the nozzle in his hand and watched the numbers climb on the pump. The desert wind moved around the canopy. Sand struck the metal support columns. A refrigeration unit ran on a trailer near the store, its motor rising and falling like a tired breath. The white trailer had no refrigeration unit. Walter had been driving for 31 years. He hauled paper products, canned food, and whatever else fit inside a dry van. He knew the sounds of tires settling, cargo shifting, and air escaping from a loose connection. The tapping did not belong to any of them. He looked toward the cab attached to the trailer. The driver's door was open. No one stood near it. Walter finished fueling and returned the nozzle to the pump. He checked the trailer number through the dust on the side panel. It belonged to a transportation company. He did not recognize a square of blue tape covered part of the rear license plate. Walter walked toward the store. The tapping continued. Inside, the air conditioner blew too cold. A television above the counter showed a weather report for southern New Mexico. The map displayed a band of wind moving toward the interstate. The cashier was a woman named Rosa. She had a silver ring on every finger of her left hand. Walter bought coffee and a package of crackers. He placed both beside the register. "You hear that trailer?" he asked. Rosa looked toward the windows. "What trailer?" "The white one by the far pump." She kept scanning the crackers. "Somebody loading?" Rosa glanced outside again. The tapping came through the glass. 3 taps, a pause, 2 more. Rosa's hand stopped over the register. "Maybe the doors are loose," she said. Walter looked at her. "Doors do not knock from the inside." Rosa did not answer. Walter paid and took the coffee. He carried it toward the white trailer. He had not planned to investigate. He told himself he only wanted the trailer number. The company could be reported to the station manager. A loose door could open on the highway. The wind pushed against his jacket. The tapping stopped when he reached the rear doors. Walter placed his palm against the metal cold. No vibration came through the panel. He bent near the lower hinge. The door was locked with a padlock that did not match the trailer's hardware. A second lock had been cut away. Fresh scratches marked the metal around the latch. Walter stepped back. A voice came from inside. "Please." The word was quiet. Walter straightened. "Can you hear me?" Something touched the inside of the door. A small scrape moved from one side to the other. Walter looked toward the cab. A man in a yellow safety vest walked from behind the fuel station. He carried a ring of keys and moved with the confident pace of someone who belonged there. "You with the trailer?" Walter asked. The man nodded. "Door sounds damaged. Air pocket," the man said. "Air pockets do not ask for help." The man stopped several feet away. His vest had no company logo. His jeans were clean. His boots held no dust from the lot. He looked at Walter's truck. "Briggs Freight?" he asked. Walter did not answer. The man smiled slightly. "Your name is on the door." Walter's company name was printed on the cab. His name was not. He looked toward the store. Rosa stood behind the counter, watching through the window. The man in the vest moved closer to the trailer. "Truckers hear things," he said. "Best to keep driving." Another man appeared beside the fuel station. He wore a dark baseball cap and held a phone against his ear. Walter took one step toward his truck. The tapping began again. 3 taps, a pause, 2 more. The man in the vest turned his head toward the trailer. The tapping stopped. Walter climbed into his cab and locked the door. He placed the coffee in the holder and started the engine. The white trailer blocked part of his path. Its tractor stood at an angle near the edge of the island. Walter could drive around it, but the man in the vest remained between the trucks. The man raised one hand. "Do not make this difficult." Walter reached for the Citizens Band radio. The channel carried several drivers discussing road conditions near Deming. He pressed the microphone. "Truck stop at the Eastern Fuel Island. I need assistance." Static filled the cab. The man in the baseball cap walked toward the driver's side window. Walter locked the passenger door again. The man tapped on the glass. "Walter Briggs." Walter held the microphone. The man leaned closer. "You can leave the trailer alone." Walter pressed the emergency shutoff button at the fuel pump. The pump stopped. A bell sounded inside the store. Rosa stepped through the entrance. "Everything all right?" she called. The man in the vest turned toward her. Walter held the horn down. The sound crossed the entire travel center. Engines shut off. Doors opened. Drivers stepped from their cabs. The man in the baseball cap moved away from Walter's truck. The trailer doors shook. A hand struck the inside panel once, twice, then again. Walter kept the horn pressed. A driver from the next fuel island ran toward the white trailer. He was a large man wearing a black jacket and a knit cap. "Open it," he said. The man in the vest took a step toward him. "Stay back." The large driver stopped. Walter released the horn and called emergency services. He gave the location, trailer number, and description of the two men. The dispatcher asked whether anyone was trapped inside. Walter looked at the trailer. Yes, the voice inside came again. Please. This time it sounded like a young woman. The man in the vest reached for the rear latch. Walter climbed out of his cab. Do not open that door, he said. The man looked at him. You want to help? Walter stood beside the fuel pump with the emergency shutoff within reach. I want the police here first. The man in the baseball cap moved behind Walter's truck. Walter heard the trailer airline release. A thin hiss began beneath the chassis. He turned toward the sound. The man had a folding knife in his hand. Walter pressed the emergency button again. The fuel island alarm began to ring. Rosa locked the store doors. The large driver moved between Walter and the two men. 3 other drivers gathered near the pumps. One held a tire iron. The man in the vest looked across the group. No one knows what is inside. The tapping stopped. The highway patrol arrived 9 minutes later. The 2 men were gone. The white trailer remained. A state trooper positioned his cruiser behind it and ordered everyone away from the doors. Another trooper searched the surrounding lot. The blue tape had been removed from the license plate. The cab held no registration, no logbook, and no personal items. The keys were missing. The troopers cut the padlock. Cold air moved from the trailer. The interior was empty. No pallets, no cargo, no driver. The floor showed dark rubber marks and several long scratches near the front wall. A row of plastic bottles stood beside the left side panel. Some were full. Some had been crushed. A child's pink shoe lay near the rear doors. Walter saw a gray sweatshirt folded beside it. The trooper lifted the sweatshirt with a gloved hand. Several cell phones had been wrapped inside the fabric. None had batteries. The young woman's voice did not return. The troopers searched the trailer again. They found no hidden compartment and no second door. The transportation company listed on the trailer had been registered 6 months earlier. Its office address belonged to a closed shipping store in Arizona. The trailer had been reported stolen in another state. No arrest followed that night. The 2 men were seen on the travel center cameras, but the footage from the fuel island had been erased. Rosa's manager said the system had been malfunctioning for weeks. The large driver gave Walter his name and phone number. He said he would testify if needed. He never answered Walter's calls. The trailer was towed away before sunrise. Walter stayed at the travel center until the troopers finished their report. He sat in his cab with the lights on and the doors locked. The coffee in the holder had gone cold. At 6:30, his wife, Marlene, called. She had heard from the company dispatcher that there had been an incident. Walter told her he was fine. Marlene asked what happened. Walter looked at the passenger seat. A small red envelope lay beneath the windshield. It contained a drawing from their grandson, Owen. The drawing showed a truck beneath a bright yellow sun. Walter had promised to bring it home. There was a trailer, he said. Marlene waited. Somebody needed help. She asked whether they had found them. Walter looked toward the empty fuel island. No, he did not tell her about the pink shoe. The investigation remained open for several months. Detectives contacted Walter twice. They showed him photographs of missing people from several states. He recognized no one. A woman in Arizona had disappeared from a bus station. A teenage boy in Texas had not returned from a grocery store. 2 men who worked seasonal construction had vanished on the same week. No connection was confirmed. The white trailer was eventually sold at auction. Walter heard this from a trooper who called him one afternoon. The trooper also said the phones had contained no usable data. Walter stopped fueling alone at night. If a trailer stood with its doors locked and its driver missing, he reported it from inside his cab. He wrote the emergency shutoff number on a card and taped it beneath the dashboard. The card had become soft at the corners from being handled. Human beings can turn an ordinary parking lot into a place where no one wants to look closely. A closed door can hold cargo, machinery, or a person whose voice has been reduced to tapping. Whenever Walter hears 3 knocks beneath a running engine, he reaches for the card under his dashboard and reads the number before he does anything else. Naomi Brooks kept a red mitten tied to the gear shifter. It belonged to her son, Theo. He had lost the matching mitten at a bus stop when he was 3. Naomi found the red one beneath a bench after the bus had left. Theo was 12 now. He had outgrown mittens and complained about the desert heat whenever he visited her in Nevada. Naomi still kept the mitten where she could touch it. She drove long-haul routes between Las Vegas, Reno, and the smaller towns beyond the mountain ranges. Her current load was canned food bound for a warehouse in Ely. The delivery could wait until morning. Naomi could not. Her mother, June, had a doctor's appointment in Reno the next afternoon. Naomi had promised to drive her if the appointment ran late. Before leaving Las Vegas, Naomi recorded a voice message for Theo. "Your grandmother says the doctor's office has the good vending machine. I am going to test it," Theo replied, with a recording of himself playing 3 notes on a trombone. The third note broke in the middle. Naomi played it twice. At a fuel stop near Tonopah, she bought a bag of clementines and a paper map. The cashier recognized her and placed a cup of ice beside the register. "You look like you will need it," the cashier said. Naomi poured the ice into her water bottle. Outside, the desert wind moved across the parking lot. It pushed dust against the truck tires and rattled the metal fence beside the highway. A maintenance truck stood near the exit. Its yellow lights turned slowly. The driver, an older man named Orson, leaned against the hood while he smoked. Naomi had seen him at several stops. He knew every service station between Reno and the Utah border. "Road through the Monitor Range is closed," he said. "For how long?" "Rock slide." "Since when?" "Since the last truck stopped coming through." Naomi looked at the route map. The main highway continued northeast through a narrow pass. A marked detour curved south and added nearly 3 hours. "I can take the old road," she said. Orson dropped ash onto the pavement. "That road is closed too, because of the rock slide, because nobody uses it." Naomi waited. Orson looked past her toward the highway. "If you see trucks out there, do not join them." He walked toward the maintenance truck before she could ask what he meant. Naomi returned to her cab. The refrigerator unit behind her began its cycle. The engine note deepened. Air moved through the vents in a steady mechanical stream. She checked the load temperature, fuel level, tires, and seal. Then she folded the paper map along the old route and placed it beside the dashboard photograph of June's doctor appointment. The road ahead was still open. Naomi left Tonopah at 11:40. She drove north through flat desert where the mountains remained low on the horizon. The sky held no moon. The stars were sharp enough to show between the clouds. For the first hour, the trip was ordinary. Tires hissed over the pavement. The engine pulled evenly. The radio carried reports about wind near the pass. Naomi ate the clementines one at a time. She placed the peels in the cup holder and counted the seeds on the dashboard. 4, then 5. At the turnoff for the old road, a state sign blocked the entrance closed no further. Nenorder. The sign stood crooked in the sand. Naomi drove past it. A mile later, she heard engines behind her. The sound came from a long-distance one truck. Then another, then several more, their diesel notes, blending into a low, continuous vibration. Naomi checked the mirrors. No headlights showed. The highway behind her ran straight through open desert. Dust moved across the road, but the air remained clear enough to see for miles. The engines grew louder. A radio clicked. "Stay on the old route." Naomi reached for the microphone. "Who is this?" Static answered. The engines continued behind her. A single headlight appeared in the left mirror. It belonged to an old tractor with a rounded hood. Its paint looked black beneath the night. No company name showed on the doors. The truck remained several lengths behind. Naomi checked the right mirror. 4 more trucks followed. Their headlights were uneven. Some had one light, some had none. The road reflected no beams beneath them. Naomi eased off the accelerator. The convoy slowed with her. She accelerated. The convoy matched her speed. The radio clicked again. "Do not leave the line." Naomi held the microphone. "Identify yourself." A different voice answered. "Earl is behind you." Naomi did not know an Earl. Another voice followed. Vern took the outside lane. A third voice said, "Mabel is riding with us." The names meant nothing, but the drivers spoke as if they had been using the channel for years. Naomi switched to another frequency. The same voices continued. She turned the radio off. The engines remained at the next bend. An old mile marker stood half buried in sand. Naomi had not seen it on the map. The first truck moved closer. Its rear doors had no reflectors. The hinges were polished bright, though the rest of the vehicle looked decades old. Naomi looked into the cab window. The driver sat upright behind the wheel. His face remained hidden by the angle of the glass. The convoy passed beneath a stretch of power lines. No shadows appeared beneath the trucks. Naomi gripped the gear shifter. The red mitten brushed her wrist. The road narrowed between dark hills. Wind carried loose gravel across the asphalt. The old highway had once connected the mining camps in the north. Now most of it had been covered by sand. The center line disappeared several miles earlier. Naomi considered turning around. The convoy remained behind her. Its engines filled the mirrors. A voice came through the dead radio. "Naomi, keep moving." She looked at the radio. The unit had no lights. Her name appeared again. Naomi Brooks. The convoy spread across the road. The first truck moved beside her cab. Its passenger window was open. Air rushed through it without carrying any engine noise. Naomi looked toward the driver. The seat was empty. The truck continued beside her. Her own tires struck a patch of rough pavement. The cab shook. The empty truck remained smooth. Naomi pressed the brake. The convoy stopped all of it. The road ahead showed no headlights. The road behind held no headlights. The engine sounds continued around her without a visible source. Naomi kept both hands on the wheel. A door opened somewhere outside. Then another footsteps moved through the sand. They came from every direction. Naomi turned on the interior light. The red mitten swung from the gear shifter. A voice spoke through the radio. "Your mother is waiting." Naomi pulled the microphone cable from the unit. The radio went dark. A second voice answered from outside the cab. "June is waiting." Naomi pressed the lock button on both doors. The passenger handle moved once, then again. A shape passed across the windshield. It was too tall to be a person standing on the road. It moved between the headlights without casting a shadow. Naomi started the engine. The road ahead remained blocked by the first truck. She shifted into reverse. The footsteps stopped. Naomi backed the truck along the shoulder. Sand dragged beneath the tires. The trailer moved toward the ditch. The radio remained disconnected. The convoy did not move. Naomi reversed until the road widened near a collapsed mining gate. A rusted sign pointed toward a dry wash. She remembered the paper map. The old road curved south beyond the gate and returned to the main highway after several miles. During daylight, the route might have been passable. At night, with sand filling the tire tracks, it was a choice made without proof. Naomi turned toward the gate. The first truck disappeared. The others followed. No engines accelerated. No tires moved. One moment the road was full of trucks. The next, it was empty. Naomi drove through the gate. The desert floor rose and fell beneath the wheels. Loose stones struck the trailer. The cab bounced against the seat mounts. She kept the headlights low. The power lines continued beside the route. Naomi used them as a guide. Behind her, engines began again. She did not look in the mirrors. The sound followed at a fixed distance. The radio clicked. "Take the wash." Naomi kept to the road. "Take the wash," the voice repeated. She saw the dry wash ahead. It crossed the road like a pale scar wide enough to swallow the front axle. Naomi stopped. The sand below the road had collapsed. A narrow stream of dark water moved beneath the surface. The route ended there. The engines behind her drew closer. Naomi looked at the paper map. The old road continued beyond the wash, but no bridge appeared. She opened the driver's door and stepped onto the ground. Wind crossed the desert, carrying the smell of wet stone. No convoy stood behind her. No headlights, no tire tracks. Only her own marks ran through the sand. Naomi climbed back inside and turned the truck around. The trailer swung close to the gate. She corrected twice, then drove toward the highway. The engines faded. At the last bend, Naomi looked into the right mirror. The convoy stood behind her again. Every truck faced the same direction. Every cab was empty. The first truck's passenger window showed a pale reflection. It was Naomi's face. She turned away from the mirror. The red mitten caught on the shifter as she accelerated. The highway appeared at dawn. A patrol vehicle waited near the closed sign. The officer stepped toward Naomi's cab and asked where she had come from. Naomi pointed toward the old road. The officer looked at the sign. "That route has been closed for 2 years," she told him about the convoy. He listened without interrupting. "Any license plates? No company names? No drivers?" Naomi kept her hands on the wheel. "None that I saw." The officer drove the old route later that morning. He found Naomi's tire tracks leading to the mining gate and back. Nothing else, no additional tire marks, no footprints, no abandoned trucks. The state reopened the main highway 3 days later. Naomi completed the delivery in Ely and drove directly to Reno. June's appointment lasted 40 minutes. The vending machine took Naomi's money and gave her 2 packets of crackers. She kept one. Theo asked about the trip. Naomi told him the road had been closed. She did not mention the names on the radio. She no longer drives the Nevada desert after sunset. When a convoy appears in her mirrors, she counts the reflections before she checks the speedometer. 1, 2, 3. If a truck carries no reflection, Naomi pulls into the nearest lit place and waits for morning. Some roads end where the map says they continue. Some drivers are remembered only by voices. Before every trip, Naomi touches the red mitten on the gear shifter and makes sure it is still there.